It is Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was yet another non-virtual get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Wednesday. Actually, did just a teeny tiny bit of ass kicking. You can't take it too seriously, only because it is only sparring. But I did feel quite dominant in sparring today. I've been having a lot of trouble like forcing myself to spar. And really, that's where you make all of your improvement and where you learn all of your real lessons. And so, I've been trying to force myself to address it, to get in there and do some sparring. So I got in around today, and I probably should have stayed around for more than one, but I hadn't been even doing one for a while. So baby steps. So anyway, I tried to take it easy on my opponent, and but I have this real bad habit of using strength, when I'm doing stuff, and most of what I was doing as far as strength is concerned is I was just trapping him, he would I had him in full guard, and so he would lean back. But then I would pull him back down again, and I just had him trapped in my guard for a little while, and then he started getting frustrated, so I just disengaged my legs, and I didn't sweep him, but I did something else where I managed to get on top of him, and I kimura'd him on both sides. But again, it's something where I haven't been doing any sparring to begin with, and so it felt good to get on the mat, and I was again just trying to feel the moment instead of trying to really impose my will. But it wasn't until I would get up on top, and in the second one, I started going for it before I even got my leg disengaged from a half guard position. He had my leg wrapped, or he had his legs wrapped around one of my legs, and yet I was going for the kimura on the other side, and so it was something that I could pull off, but he rolled into it to get over to get me off of it, and I kind of snugged my hip out, and then got him back down again, and disengaged the leg, and then but I kind of had to move him in the position that I did in order to disengage his grip on my leg and keeping me in half guard. But I was able to get full mount and seal the meal deal on that kimura. Now, as far as that goes, I don't know if I was putting too much effort to it. And the first one, the second one, it's like I had the arm isolated, and so I did allow him plenty of time to, try and weave the hand in, or, do something, make a frame, use the arm to make a frame and try and stop me from taking it. But instead, it seemed like, I don't know. I think he was maybe taking it really easy or something. I don't know. But anyway, I isolated the arm and just slowly snaked it around until I got it to where I wanted it. And I put my chin on his forearm, hooked around back and grabbed the shoulder, and then I got my hand over his forearm, brought it down, and sealed it up. And I stopped short. And he was not really resisting me, but it's like I didn't know if I was hurting him or something, so I disengaged it entirely, and I kind of let up on it. I'm like, "Am I hurting you?" And he's like, "No," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so he's like, "You were just right there at the edge," and I go, "Oh, okay." So I finished it off, and he tapped, and everything was cool, But I'm not one of those guys that tries to force the submission. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And if it's not, usually it's because I haven't held something tight enough. I did have one spot where I almost got him in an inverted armbar. And the only reason that I didn't was that I didn't have him pulled tight enough down and have my left arm, or left hand rather, up and over his left shoulder. If I'd had him tucked a little bit tighter, I would have been able to get that leg around his head and either kick him down to close that, get him to fall over on that side and then close out the armbar there, or I could have, if I was able to get his elbow above my crotch, I would have been able to lock down an inverted armbar rather. But it was good to do, just to feel where I'm at, because I've been out of sorts with regard to jiu-jitsu. I haven't been doing as much as I really want to do or need to do, and so it felt good to get on the mat. I still feel like I had another round in me though, so maybe next time. But yeah, as far as what we covered in class, it was this badass setup for a armbar, and me and my teammate worked it. I don't know if we were supposed to be going back and forth, but that's pretty much what we did for like the entirety of the class, is back and forth this armbar. And then we were trying to do, I think, the go-go plata? Yeah, go-go plata from the same position, where you're starting in a butterfly position. Your opponent's coming in on you, and you kick them over to it's like a sweep, just a butterfly sweep, and going from there to a go-go plata. And I had the hardest time getting my foot up to the right position. And it was funny, the instructor was saying, he's like, you've got the flexibility for it, it's just getting your brain to do it. And I'm like, yeah, I can see how that's probably the issue. I've always had just a little bit of coordination issue as far as like translating something said and even something shown to something that I can do physically. It's always been a little bit of a jump for me. I can't explain it, but like it takes me like one or two times more to see it. But after I've seen it those one or two more times, I usually like hammer it down really, really tight. And so there were a few things that I was trying to show my teammate with regard to this particular setup, and honestly, he caught it so fucking perfect a couple of times. It's like the first set that he was doing, it felt like he was off just a little bit, but there were only real key points where it's like he just needed a teeny tiny bit of reminder to lock it down. And one of the things was like he kept disengaging his arm instead of just bringing his hand over my head to grab my hand when I'm like trying to force him off of my head. And so I kind of showed him that, and I think it was probably like 15 minutes before we stopped doing it, where that particular feature locked in for him, and it's like after that he was off to the races with it. And I showed him by putting in a counter or two that I like to do in that particular situation. And one of them is if you can get your elbow far enough up instead of just right on that spot in between the legs. If you can get your elbow just a little bit higher up, you can reach around with your other hand around their thigh and then bring them down and kind of sit up at the same time to where you're on top of their legs, and they might still have a hold of your arm, but if you can break that grip that they have on you with their legs, and bring your feet up, say, and like ankle hook around their ankle or something like that, where you're able to get an anchor point at the bottom and then extend and kind of get their hips up high enough to where you can just withdraw your arm. And then if you've done your due diligence and you've got your hand, say, on their knee, and you've got them kind of pinned down to the ground, so you got their bottom leg stapled with your left leg, and you've got your right knee on the outside of their right knee, and you've got your chest right on their hips. So from there, you just want to bring that left foot up, hook the right ankle, right? And so now you're pinning both legs with one leg and just working it up from there. Maybe get that hook in on the right side from there. Maybe reaching around the back of the neck, kind of make sure they're tucked in so you can bring yourself up level and hop that other leg around, bring them around, and take that back. Anyway, had a lot of fun today, and I think that that particular approach to the arm bar, I think I'm gonna be utilizing that one. It was kind of brutal, and I was able to keep it really, really tight, and to me that's important. That I'm able to keep control of my opponent pretty tightly, and that was one thing I was trying to show my teammate as well, is that you don't have to do it fast. If you can do it tight, if you're holding at the right contact points, you don't necessarily have to use Herculean strength either if you're doing it right. But if you're holding it tight, you can take your time. I was showing him, I'm like sitting on his chest, and I've got his arms wrapped to no end. I got my hand wrapped around his bicep there, and it's really tucked tight. And I just slowly walk that leg around, so it's over his head. He knows which arm I'm going to go back with, but there's nothing he can do about it. He can't grab onto my leg because both of his arms are pinched between my chest and my legs. And they're not in a position where he can reach around and grab anything. And so then it's just a matter of, maybe I'm done with my sandwich up here. I can go ahead and disengage from on top of my opponent to just lean back and take that armbar. And there are a couple variations on the armbar even from there that can make it even more painful. But we're not going to go into those. We didn't go into them in class, and so I'm not going to describe them here. But the point being that you don't necessarily have to be the fastest. You just have to apply your pressure properly and try to get everything as tight as possible. Really using what weight you do have, what pressure you can apply. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down with some music. And we're going to go with body count, because we always start with body count. But what song? And there's one, and I haven't played it in a long time. And so here it is. Institutionalized 2014 by Body Count. First Dance. Here on Coin Metal. And that was Clutch with Escape from the Prison Planet. And so, as far as what we're going to get into today, I thought this was kind of timely and thematic. This is on thenation.com. Federal agents tapped protesters' phones in Portland. And this is by Ken Klippenstein. So yes, penis. This summer, Portland looked like a war zone. Phalanxes of shadowy law enforcement personnel fired crowd control munitions as plumes of tear gas billowed into the sky. Federal agents, without clearly visible identification, rounded up protesters and loaded them into unmarked cars on American streets. When the videos began to spread online, it was hard to tell what was going on, or how widely. The public backlash was ferocious, spurring Congress to demand that the Department of Homeland Security disclose information about the operation. But the DHS never came clean to the public about the full extent of its intelligence operations in Portland, which consisted of clandestine activities including interceptions of protesters' phone calls conducted by a task force that included federal agencies besides the DHS, according to two former intelligence officers familiar with the matter. Quote, unidentified stormtroopers, unmarked cars kidnapping protesters and causing severe injuries in response to graffiti. These are not the actions of a democratic republic. Oh, you know what? Fuck you, dude. Whoever this is saying that, they apparently weren't watching all the videos of these assholes throwing firebombs and shit at the federal courthouse. Anyway, continuing. These are not the actions of a democratic republic. Department of Homeland Security's actions in Portland undermine its mission, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tweeted in mid-July. Later that month, Washington Post reported that the DHS's Intelligence Division, the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, INA, had generated intelligence reports on several prominent journalists covering the Portland protests. Members of both the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees promptly demanded to know what kinds of intelligence they had collected on both journalists and protesters. A letter from the Senate contained the suggestive admonition that the division is, quote, obligated by statute to keep up the Congressional Intelligence Committee's full and currently informed of its operations. Yet, at the time of this writing, DHS has failed to respond to Congress's questions. Quote, notwithstanding the selective and incomplete document production thus far, the committee has reason to believe that DHS and INA are withholding responsive records relating to INA's activities in Portland and in support of DHS's response to nationwide protests. House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff wrote in a letter to the DHS's intelligence branch, quote, this is not to say that the DHS did not respond to the public furor shortly after Congress's initial... I don't know if this is a quote or not, but it's in a different font, slightly. Anyway, continuing. This is not to say that the DHS did not respond to the public furor. Shortly after Congress's initial requests, DHS shocked the national security world by removing its high-ranking Undersecretary of Intelligence, Brian Murphy. Murphy had served as chief of INA, the wing of DHS that is a member of the rarefied intelligence community, and it is authorized to handle highly classified information about security threats to the domestic United States. Though Murphy's removal appeared to mollify Congress, the public narrative that he had been removed for the intelligence reports on journalists struck some intelligence officials as dubious. Quote, he did not get reassigned over some unclassified program, a former DHS INA intelligence officer who had served under Murphy told The Nation. Quote, this is a convenient story, but that isn't what's going on. Unlike more sensitive classified intelligence, the journalist reports were based entirely on publicly available information, and while privacy rules generally prevent, quote, U.S. persons from being the subject of intelligence assessments, it is still not uncommon. Quote, that kind of shit happens all the time, the former intelligence officer explained. The early narrative became all the more dubious when Murphy filed a whistleblower complaint with Congress alleging retaliation by the department. According to the complaint, the reason Murphy had been reassigned was not what happened in Portland, but a series of earlier whistleblower complaints he had filed alleging that he had been pressured to manipulate intelligence. This is alleged to have included DHS leaderships asking Murphy to manufacture intelligence about terrorists entering the United States through the southern border, and to block intelligence assessments focusing on threats from white supremacists and from Russia. The Nation has reported on the difficulties described by DHS officials in monitoring white supremacists. Quote, "A guy like Brian Murphy, you're not going to ruin his career and drag him through the mud over some bullshit," the former intelligence officer said. According to him, multiple federal agencies from DHS and to the FBI asked if any intelligence officials would volunteer to be deployed. But when DHS INA sought volunteers to deploy to Portland during an all-hands call, it was not met with enthusiasm. Quote, "They asked for volunteers and nobody wanted to go," the former intelligence officer said. The fact that they asked for volunteers shows that it was outside the scope of their duties. You only do that if you don't have the ability to order someone to go, probably because it's illegal. A current FBI official described a similar call for volunteers to respond to civil unrest this summer, agreeing that it was extremely unusual. Quote, "This is the first time I've seen volunteer requests for another field office," the source said. A current DHS official described a colleague with expertise in electronic surveillance who was being deployed to Portland, but for what purpose? Quote, "Extracting information from protesters' phones," the DHS official said. While in Portland, an interagency task force involving DHS and the Justice Department used a sophisticated cell phone cloning attack, the details of which remain classified, to intercept protesters' phone communications, according to two former intelligence officers familiar with the matter. Cell phone cloning involves stealing a phone's unique identifiers and copying them to another device in order to intercept the communications received by the original device. The former intelligence officials described it as part of the, quote, "low-level voice intercept operation," declining to go into further detail, one of them citing the sensitive nature of the surveillance tool and the other an ongoing leak investigation within INA. Quote, "You're getting an inside view into your targets, who they are, who they're talking to, the hierarchy," the former intelligence officer said, explaining that many within the DHS believe that Antifa is an organized group, as opposed to the largely spontaneous, decentralized ideological tendency that most experts, including Trump's own FBI director, believe it is. The DHS intelligence has even found some limited evidence, which he considered then, of foreign sponsorship. I read something the other day that said they got some massive amount of money from China. Anyway, continuing. Attorney General William Barr, however, recently claimed that Antifa is receiving foreign sponsorship, a necessary criterion to formally designate it as a terrorist organization, which President Trump vowed to do in July. The Nation recently reported on DHS intelligence's attempts to tie Antifa to Kurdish militant groups in Syria. I think they're barking up the wrong tree there. Quote, "Signals intelligence collection would not be useful for preventing opportunistic looting or violent confrontation. It presumes that the existence of coordinated, purposeful, and unlawful activity that is conducted through electronic means said Stephen Aftergood, who heads the Federation of American Scientists Project on Government Secrecy. Quote, "The general concern is that DHS treated mass public protests, not just violent individuals, as suspicious and targets of investigation or worse." While it wasn't clear which individuals had specifically been targeted in Portland, both former intelligence officers agreed that it had violated protocol. Quote, "They were abusing people's rights," one said. In addition to signals intelligence collection, the Portland operation involved clandestine aspects, according to the former intelligence officer. This appears consistent with a tip received this summer. Several members of the U.S. Marshal Service, part of the Justice Department, sent to Portland, claimed to be affiliated with a private firm called Strategic Oil, according to travel records obtained by the Nation. While they did not identify themselves as law enforcement, the travel records contain information indicating that they were marshals, including that they were given a special discount for federal government employees. Clandestine methods tend to be used only for the most sensitive operations, more commonly overseas than domestically. The Justice Department did not respond to multiple requests for comment. I wonder why. Travel records did not reflect that the DHS was using any sort of cover story in Portland. One of the biggest misconceptions about the Portland operation was that the DHS took the lead, the former intelligence officer said, explaining that the Justice Department played a major role. While he didn't dispute that Murphy oversaw the DHS INA's segment of the task force, he said that the Justice Department, especially the USMS, but also the FBI, played a far more significant role. Quote, "It was clear that he, Murphy, was directed from higher up," he said. A current DHS official described how a colleague who was being deployed to Portland had alluded to using the Drug Enforcement Agency part of the Justice Department for the purposes of accessing protesters' phones. Quote, "He said that he needed some sort of special key in order to, he said that DEA has that capability and vaguely alluded to possibly borrowing it or using from another agency once he got to Portland." In June, BuzzFeed News reported that the DEA had been authorized to conduct covert surveillance of protesters involved in demonstrations against the police killing of George Floyd. Then in August, the USMS confirmed that it had conducted aerial surveillance over the Portland protests. The former intelligence officers agreed that the low-level voice intercept operation had been conducted on the ground, was far more invasive than aerial surveillance, and involved equipment that the INA did not have access to. Quote, "There were at least 2 federal agencies, and there was some spooky shit going on," one former intelligence officer said of the Portland operation. Attorney General Barr has repeatedly echoed President Trump's rhetoric on Antifa, after President Trump alleged without evidence that a plane full of violent protesters had been traversing the country. Barr claimed that the Justice Department had received similar reports of violent protesters traveling from all over the country to sow mayhem. Last week, Barr urged federal prosecutors to consider charging violent protesters with sedition, a rarely used charge for people conspiring to overthrow the government. This week, Barr designated New York, Portland, and Seattle as, quote, "anarchist jurisdictions," a term often used interchangeably with Antifa. Yeah, they're not fucking anarchists, dude. Quote, "When the president makes the kind of statements that he does on the news, you know that you have tacit approval," said the former intelligence officer. You need a wink from your supervisor. You just need a wink from your supervisor. Yeah, I don't know if that's entirely what's going on there. Let's see here. I'm looking to see if there was any comments, and apparently there are two. Capitalist Moose says bonged. Yeah, whatever. George Rudolph says, viewing this report sitting in a Florence hotel room, I first thought I was reading about Belarus. Can somebody please point out the difference if there is any? Dude, starting to wonder. But anyway, this is important to me only because they seem to be using some really weird intelligence tools that, in my mind, are not constitutional. And as a matter of fact, there was a recent ruling, and I haven't gone into it here, I don't think, but it was a Portland case concerning the NSA's mass surveillance program, where they were basically recording every single packet of everybody's transactions going across the internet. And when I say transactions, I mean any transmissions basically that were going over the internet. And they had been doing that. Whether or not they're still doing it, I couldn't tell you, but they probably are. If they aren't, there's probably other agencies that are, and they just farm the duties out to them. And then there's that layer of plausible deniability. But it's one of those things where it's like, if it's available, people will try and get it. It's like the capability is there, and so these intelligence agencies are abusing their authority and the tools that are endowed to them. It's like they make a phone call over to DHS or DEA and say, hey, we really need this tool that hacks into people's phones, but we don't actually have one of those, so you want to partner up, maybe collab here on our project and loan it to us? Sure. Because, of course, there's a reciprocation later on where there's something maybe not under the DEA umbrella that does follow within the DHS's protocols, and they're able to do it for them, But where this is important is the things like spoofing people's phones and cloning their phones and shit like that. I would argue that they're probably not cloning phones to receive the information. What they're cloning is cell towers. And they're using the, Razor Shark or some shit like that. Or something along those lines, where what it does is it imitates a beacon for, say, AT&T's network or Verizon's network or anything like that. And the rest of the network can't distinguish it from it, And so when you're making a phone call, it's picking up your phone call, and it has to go through that node because the node is the nearest node. But the thing is, it's probably riding in a fucking vehicle, maybe within 2 or 3 car lengths of you. And so that's why your phone defaults to it instead of any other towers, because it is the closest tower to you. And that's just how those networks work. Now, of course, they probably won't have to be right next to you, especially if they're using 5G already, but the point being that those are the types of tools that they're actually using out there. I would go so far as to suggest that you could probably do every single thing that they're talking about with that type of capability, rather than bothering to clone every individual phone that's out there and receiving the packets that's being, put out and received to it. But as far as Antifa being a terrorist organization, I have my doubts. I have my feelings on it, where I think that they do receive some sort of corporate or private sponsorship that is allowing them to continue their shit. Somebody's willing to pay for it. Because, as far as I'm concerned, they're like any other group of mercenaries. That they do what they do for money. They don't run around the street for free. They're doing that because somebody said, hey, pay you $300 a day to go out there and just cause fucking mayhem. And it's not really that outlandish. There's plenty of liquidity out there floating around. But I disapprove of these kinds of intelligence gathering techniques. I mean, they might be effective, but they aren't in line with the Constitution or its amendments. I think that the problem is that there are places where they can use the data, and they have used the data in investigations and shit. But they don't use. I think they still have some hurdles to jump before they're able to use stuff that's on your own individual device. Because then they have to explain how they did it. And once they've done that, people will start looking for a way to circumvent them. It's pretty much how it always works. Anyway, so speaking of legal stuff, we got this thing here. It's on CoinJournal, and one of our favorite crypto quote-unquote thought leaders, Craig Wright, is back in the news again. And so I figured I'd cover this. This is on coinjournal.com or .net rather. Craig Wright's crypto lawsuit far from finished. And this was authored September 22nd, 2020 by Sam Grant. So yes, penis. The criminal lawsuit involving Bitcoin SV's Craig Wright takes another turn as the case will continue to court despite calls for delay. It's not the first time Craig Wright's name has been in the media in relation to crypto, and from the looks of it, it will not be the last. The news comes after it was revealed that a lawsuit involving him will now continue in court next year, or early next year. The lawsuit revolves around the dispute over Wright's early Bitcoin holdings. In the latest string of court battles, Wright attempts to have the lawsuit dismissed through a summary request were rejected. According to the court reports, the current case involves a claim to $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. The current case. In February 2018, Ira Kleeman filed a claim against Wright on behalf of his deceased brother, David Kleeman. He claimed that David was the rightful owner of half of Wright's Bitcoin earnings, as the two had partnered to mine Bitcoin back in the early crypto days. The case has since continued in court, and early this year more documents were produced. Wright had recently requested a summary judgment that would have settled the matter and blocked it from hearing to trial. The request was based on two main arguments. One, whether the alleged partnership ended in 2011, which makes it too late for the case to proceed, and two, whether an oral agreement existed at all. Request denied, the case goes forward. The request was, however, rejected by an order signed by Judge Beth Bloom of Florida's federal court. The filing also revealed that Kleeman and Wright had, quote, share control over their Bitcoin private keys based on the messages the two exchanged. The trial is set to continue in January next year. Wright and Bitcoin SV in general have made headlines in the past for other different reasons. The company's large blocks and small network have cast doubts on its operation and legitimacy. Wright, on the other hand, has occasionally made dodgy and questionable claims that he is the identity behind Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin's creator. Yeah, he's not. And so, yeah. So apparently he is still going to court, probably going to go to jail. And I'm trying to find out if there was anything more to this. Like if there was a report or something about it. And it doesn't look like there is. But anyways, so yeah. Craig Wright still in hot water. And I'd read somewhere that he'd tried to get his case dismissed or something like that, and they just said no. And so yeah, I still say he's going to end up going to jail. He's made a bunch of outlandish claims. He's led the court on wild goose chases and all kinds of shit, wasted everybody's time. And so, yeah, I think on contempt of court charges alone, he's probably in for a life sentence. But that's just me. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down with some music. And where'd it go, though? I've been wanting to play some Tool. It's been a long time since I played some Tool. And so, yeah, Parabola here on Coin Metal. And that was Body Count with Shallow Graves. And so, as far as what else we're going to be getting into tonight, I was getting through my my tabs here, and I found two that I want to get into at least, if not a third also. And this next one is kind of a continuation of Mr. Wright's debacle. But yeah, a little bit further depth here. This is on CryptoPotato.com. Million Bitcoin trial are denied. Oh, wait a minute. So, Craig Wright's efforts to dismiss Kleeman's 1.1 million Bitcoin trial are denied, quote, on all grounds. And this is by George Eve. So yes, penis. And this is last updated September 22nd, 2020 at 10:06. No indication of time zone. Shame on you, George. Craig Wright's tactics for delaying the Kleeman estate litigation process may be coming to an end. The United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida has denied, quote, on all grounds, the motion introduced by Craig S. Wright to dismiss the long-standing Kleeman v.S. Wright lawsuit. Wright's motion was denied, quote, on all grounds. When a motion is denied on all grounds, in theory, it means that there is no argument considered valid or at least reasonable by a judge to satisfy any claim. In other words, there is no point in trying again since all the doors are closed and risking further delay could have negative consequences for whoever tries. In the court's reasoning, Wright could not provide sufficient arguments to delay or dismiss the case. Therefore, the judge rejected his petition in the absolute, and the next logical step is to set a date for trial. Quote, upon review, the court found that the defendant's arguments unpersuasive. The frustrating part is not know what to believe. 1 minute I am told that you received funding for the next 5 years and are able to get back to work on building the business, and then the next second I am told there is still no progress being made with the business. Accordingly, the court rejects defendant's assertion that the court 8 fails, or that count 8 fails, rather. As set forth above, defendant's motion is denied on all grounds. Earlier this month, the court decided to postpone the pre-trial work due to both parties' joint request. Specifically, the proceedings regarding the proposed verdict form, or voir dire, questions, exhibit list, and objections will now occur on December 15th. Demonstrative and summary exhibits were moved to December 21st. Craig Wright shows what not to do on a trial. With this new ruling, the options for avoiding trial are practically nil. Craig Wright has faced several failures throughout the judicial chapter, including the impossibility of proving his ownership of the Bitcoin addresses he claimed to own, and the frustrating and amusing case of the Nigerian, quote, bonded carrier who never showed up. Before the real battle, this new, quote, defeat puts Craig Wright in a questionable position within the crypto community and the legal community. Being a highly educated lawyer himself, also accused of plagiarizing his thesis and dissertation, it is attractive for many experts to narrate Wright's constant failures to handle this controversy. Breaking. Surprisingly, no default sanctions for Craig Wright in the Kleeman v. Wright case. Trial by jury it is. Quote, perjury and fabricated evidence do not constitute fraud upon the court because they are evils that can and should be exposed at trial. Oh my gosh. And that was by Arthur Van Pelt, June 24th, 2020. Wright and his lawyers have made every effort to get out of the lawsuit, and it nearly ended once when a contempt ruling went the wrong way for him, shared attorney Stephen Paley, adding in a later tweet, quote, I'm only on page 9 and already my eyes hurt. Y'all owe a bucket of herring for this. Breaking. Federal court denies Craig Wright's motion for summary judgment completely. Kleeman lawsuit over more than $1 billion in Bitcoin overheads to trial. It's a 93-page decision. I'm going to tweetify the tasty bits, so strap in. And we did not follow that up. The most significant lawsuit ever brought by Craig Wright, who in recent months dropped other legal cases against big names in the crypto industry who accused him of fraud. Almost 1.1 million Bitcoin is at stake in this case. That's assuming, of course, that it actually exists, or that it was ever in control of Craig Wright himself, which is, it's always been a question. And I tend to think what's really going on, at least behind the scenes, is that Wright is trying to crack some hard drives that were encrypted that he had obtained from the Kleeman estate. And this is just my suspicion. You know, that he's trying to crack them so he can get to those wallet.dat files and export that Bitcoin. See, I think he's been borrowing against it, you know, where he's been going to certain entities and saying, hey, I've got this 1.1 million Bitcoins sitting around in a drive, and as soon as I get access to it, I can give you a cut of it. But, you know, I can't quite get it yet. So, like, can you front me some money? And as soon as I crack it, man, I'll give you some. And, yeah. So he's probably got creditors waiting around the world saying, hey, where's that money, man? Where's that money? Give him my money. I know I would be. Anyway, so, yeah, as far as Craig Wright goes, I knew from the moment he started claiming that he was Satoshi Nakamoto that it was going to be something that ended in lawsuits and tears and probably some jail time, if not a death or two. And I still hold that position. You know, it's a dangerous thing to claim that you are Satoshi Nakamoto. It's very dangerous. And, you know, he thought that if he could just fool the right people, that he would be able to coast by and everybody would give him all the credit and accolades like he's Satoshi Nakamoto, and, you know, everybody's going to listen to him and do everything that he wants them to do. And that's not what happened. Because people that are involved in crypto, or at least were when he started making those claims, they tended to be a lot more questioning than the average person getting involved in crypto these days. And they were far more suspicious, and especially people claiming to be Satoshi Nakamoto, because there had been previous claims to that effect, and they had been debunked. But anyway, so yeah, I think that he's, it's one of those things where, like, if he ever proved that he was Satoshi Nakamoto, he would have people trying to sue him and get a hold of his money. And if he failed to prove that he was Satoshi Nakamoto, he would have people suing him and chasing after him for some money. And so, he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't at this point. And I mean, I think it's kind of obvious how it's going to go, that he's going to fail and he's going to end up in jail and so on and so forth. But I had a few other things that I wanted to get into today, and I'm trying to find it now. Where's Iran? No. There's something about how I guess there's been some issues in China, with regard to their ability to mine because of the monsoon situation there, and apparently it's kind of like decentralizing stuff again. Let's see here. Oh, no, we already cut. There we go. And this one is on BitcoinMagazine.com, and this is by Jesse Williams. So no penis. The sun never sets on Bitcoin mining. Decentralization continues as China flounders. And this is authored on September 22nd, 2020. Here we go. Bitcoin miners have successfully survived the 2020 halvening and COVID-19, and the network is now seeing some of its highest hash rates ever as these operations power up new equipment and reach new levels of decentralization going into the second decade of Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining is decentralizing. China still dominates the Bitcoin mining space, although the percentage of the hash rate coming from that country has dropped recently from around 65% in early 2020 to about 50% more recently, as Chinese mining farms are weathering a particularly difficult monsoon season, and the government is sending mixed signals that Bitcoin may be under attack as part of a campaign to promote the new digital yuan. Meanwhile, the US, Russia, Iceland, Central Asia, and South America, among other regions, are all seeing continued growth in mining as miners benefit from plentiful, cheap, stranded energy in these regions, principally hydroelectric power, wind power, or oil and gas, depending on the location. In addition, Kazakhstan has been in the news lately as its government partnered with miners through a $715 million investment fund. The following graph from the report prepared by BitUda for Fidelity Digital shows that an estimated breakdown of hash power around the world indicated that China contributes 50% of the world's hash power, while the US is in second place with 14%. It should be noted, though, that other analysis have placed China's share as high as 65% of the total hash rate, with the US just at 77.2% and China at 6.9% presently. Chinese operations are looking westward. The US and China make up about 21% of the global hash rate, at least in BitUda's analysis, second only to China, and that share is expected to go up by many in the industry. In a recent live stream hosted by Bitcoin Magazine, Elsa Zhao, the marketing manager for Chinese mining giant Wets Miner, confirmed that her company is focusing its expansion plans outside of China. In an announcement officially coming soon, the company, second only to Bitmain in its singular ability to influence Bitcoin mining, will offer details about its new mining equipment manufacturing plant planned for the U.S. Bitmain, a Chinese operation that is still the largest mining equipment manufacturer in the world, is weathering its own storm. A company feud between co-founders Mikri Zhan and Jihan Wu that may split the company itself in half. Bitmain has two manufacturing locations, one in China for the Chinese market and one in Malaysia for international sales. As far as its mining operations, Bitmain seems poised to continue its expansion into the U.S. In a recent interview with Bitcoin Magazine's John Riggins, Bitmain's head of operations for North America, Raymond Wolantuken, said that he sees more decentralization out of China in Bitmain's future, with the company building on its current operations in Northern America. Wolantuken works from a mining farm in interior Washington state, where stranded hydroelectric power is plentiful and cheap. Bitmain also has mining farms in Texas and Tennessee. He stressed that Bitmain is now an international company as much as it is a Chinese company. Ryan Porter, head of business development for mining consultants BitUda, told Bitcoin Magazine in an interview that more investors, including some from China, are inquiring about new mining opportunities in North America. Quote, "We certainly see a reason to believe there is a significant portion of hash power will migrate to North America," said Porter. "The existing infrastructure, cost of power, and regulatory stability here is competitive globally. And the decentralization of hardware manufacturing could become a major factor for continued migration in the near future." Quote, "China has been a real industry innovator in producing the leading ASIC manufacturers," Porter added. "However, with TSMC, Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, planning to build a plant in Arizona, there could be domestic hardware manufacturers that emerge, which would also be a catalyst for hash to migrate outside of China." So, despite more expensive power pricing, averaging from 3.5 to 4 cents per megawatt, which is higher than in places like Central Asia and South America, North America is still considered a desirable hub for Bitcoin mining because of the relative stability of the political environment and the ability to lock in multi-year power contracts. China averages just under 1 cent per megawatt. The importance and ongoing challenge of Bitcoin mining decentralization. In a recently released Coinmetrics report, researchers noted that the distribution of mining and the hash rate is the most important factor in, quote, "sustaining a secure, censorship-resistant payments and savings system." It noted that mining is the anchor and the effective decentralization that provides security for the Bitcoin network. The report uses a metric called the Nakamoto coefficient, which measures the number of pools that would need to collaborate to launch a 51% attack on the network. For instance, in 2014, mining pool ghash.io controlled over half of the network's hash power for about a day, giving Bitcoin a Nakamoto coefficient of 1. The researchers concluded that Bitcoin mining has become increasingly decentralized with a Nakamoto coefficient of 4. Like most profitable enterprises within the legacy financial system, the natural pull of Bitcoin mining is toward more control and organization by one or a relatively small number of controlling bodies. No, I don't believe that's true. At this point in the early history of Bitcoin, it is inevitable that a small and informed group of early adopters, like Bitcoin Core developers, will move the system forward in an organized fashion. But, as Coinmetrics researchers argue, it's important to have significant Bitcoin mining take place in different parts of the world. And even though there are some signs that Bitcoin mining is becoming more decentralized, especially with Chinese operations moving some of their hash power to North America, there is still a long way to go before this industry can be considered truly international. Coinmetrics noted that even as hash power migrates from China, Bitcoin mining is still at risk of centralization through possible state-level coercion and vertical and horizontal integration. Quote, while Bitcoin mining is distributed, it is still at risk of centralization through state-level coercion and vertical and horizontal integration. Several exchanges, including Binance, OKX, and Huobi, operate mining pools. Bitmain, the hardware manufacturer, owns both BTC.com and Antpool and is the only investor in via BTC, noted the report. And in China, mining pools continue to grow despite a particularly difficult year. As long as there is cheap power, the incentive to build economics of scale in China will grow. The new China-based mining pool Lubian, which has China and Iran as its principal sources of hash power, only came onto the scene in March 2020, but is already in the top 10 pools by hash rate, rivaling longer-standing pools like F2 Pool, also based in China. Still, there is reason for mining decentralization advocates to remain optimistic. Samson Mao, CSO for Blockstream, which has mining farms in Quebec, Canada, and Adel, Georgia, sees continuing growth and sophistication as hash derivatives come on the market, making ownership more diverse and therefore more decentralized. Noting that Kazakhstan could be on track to become one of the world's biggest Bitcoin mining hubs as the country sets up a $715 million development fund, Mao said, quote, Bitcoin mining will become a strategic investment sector for many nation-states, slowly at first and then all at once. I've believed that for a long time, and I have also believed that one of the biggest and best things that governments can do, and it's actually twofold, is number one, entirely deregulate your energy markets. Don't even worry about licensing. Don't even worry about regulation. Get people to build fucking networks. Get people to lay out some cable. Get people to set up some electricity grids that aren't necessarily dependent upon you. This will reduce the relative cost of energy, and it will cause more people to mine here. This will put us on track to be even more competitive than we currently are. And of course, the second thing is to kind of deregulate finance to some extent. I think that, that earlier in the week, when the episode we did on Monday kind of exemplified what I've been saying pretty much all along, that the cost of regulation itself is proving to be so damaging to return on investment that the banks are basically forced to host black market monies because that's the only money that's really flowing. It's because they aren't beholden to all of the regulatory frameworks that are keeping legitimate businesses down. And that effect is great if you're trying to control the number of people that you actually have to compete with. However, what that does is it weakens your general position within the market. Because as you become more dominant, you are again represented by smaller and smaller interest groups. And sure, they might be rich and they might be waving the wand for you and all that. But in real physical terms, a greater percentage of the market is represented by somebody else. And that's the thing that really matters, is what people actually use and what people actually believe in. You know, this is one of the reasons why I don't expect any kind of national fiat currency to be going all that wide against cryptocurrencies. We're seeing some conversion over to stable coins, you know, where some of the attention is going to stable coins because they don't experience the same regulatory cruft that US dollars do. You know, people don't get taxed on them and whatnot because they're not actually US dollars. They're representations of, supposedly, of US dollars. But yeah, so I don't believe that that mining is to be treated as it has been. You know, where there's a lot of people that have been talking shit about mining because they view it as something bad or whatnot. Personally, I think these are people that mine, and they're fudding mining because they don't want to compete with you. They don't want you to put up your own hash. You know? And, you know, again, that's wonderful in that you're containing the market to yourself and whatnot. But if you make it sound like too much of a pain in the ass to mine, you start corrupting the underbelly of Bitcoin with regard to the network itself. Because fewer participants will be there. And of course there's always the matter of personal choice with regard to the incentive. You know, if the interest should die off enough to make Bitcoin profitable for smaller mining operators, they might actually start up their old hardware just to get a hold of some of those Bitcoin that you have turned your hash off of. You know, this is a 140-year fucking race. It's going to be up, it's going to be down, it's going to be in, it's going to be out. It's one of the reasons why I don't believe in second layer solutions or any of that shit, is because it kind of changes that dynamic of value. You know, where the network itself is the most valuable, the people that aren't contributing any kind of hash power to it, and they aren't actually motivated to conduct as many transactions as they can, which would reward the network, because then the miners would get miner fees or transaction fees for all of that activity. But instead, they're doing things like batching, and they're doing things like Lightning Network, and they're kind of disenfranchising miners of all of those potential fees. And see, in the long run, I expect that to have some very negative effects on Bitcoin's security. But you know, it's a balance, and you know, we can characterize it any way we want, but it's constantly in flux as people's interests change. Whether or not Bitcoin will be as relevant in 10 years, I couldn't tell you, but chances are it will be. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down with some music again, and I want to go with some Overkill, Last Man Standing, here on Coin Metal. And that was Nothing Face with Make Your Own Bones. And it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. Thank you again for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support, that is. We will be back again on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And you know, we haven't played any Slipknot tonight. There's something criminal about that. Let's go ahead and throw that down, but I gotta find the right song. Let's see here. Here we go. Little Custer, Last Dance, here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and y'all have an excellent evening. Good night.